What's up, guys? Doug Polk here, and today we're going to be taking a look at a hand that I played against a heads-up nemesis you might be familiar with. All of a sudden, Danmer pops on in. Oh! And we get one through. Hey, get the cookie jars out, Danmer. Welcome to the stream. Shout out to your boy Danmer. Hey, it's Danmer. Sorry, Dan the man. No, you're great though. Honestly, you're just you got this. That's right. This match is against Danmer. Now you're probably sitting at home asking yourself, what is a Danmer? I've never heard of a Danmer. Am I supposed to know of a Danmer? And the answer is, of course, no, you're not. But that is our opponent today, and we battled many times on the stream. There may or may not have been some slow rolling. I'm not going to point the finger at who was who. Oh, guys. Oh, what's up, Danner? Oh my God. Oh, it's just so good. It's just so good, you know.
Listen, if you want to hop in the Zoom pool with your backer, this is the punishment.
Nice. 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 Oh, no good. No good, my friend. Throw those donkers up. What up, Danmer? We might lose a bunch to jungle today, but at least we're giving Danmer the business. Now, you might remember Danmer from him hopping into some soft Zoom pools where we would play and he would tell me that he's the best heads-up no limit player of all time. At that point, I said, okay, let's go, man. Let's play some heads up, to which he said he's not bankrolled and his backer won't let him, but one day he will because he's absolutely the best. And he definitely is the best. He just can't play right now because he doesn't have the money, but one day he will because of how good he is. You know how it is, a true clash of titans. Well, anyway, he took it to the heads up live streets. He thought I was soft, so he came at me. But he had another thing coming in the day's episode of Poker Hands.
Yeah, the blanking idiot set.
Blanking idiot set.
It's not a good hand to have in Omaha.
Yeah.
That sounds sarcastic.
Thankfully, you had some backup.
That's true. Thank God.
Oh my! Whoa!
Uh-oh.
We are gonna play a big pot.
Pocket kings for the supreme leader.
This is gonna go 3-bet.
Facing a 3-bet here. Queen jack of clubs.
Danmer's gonna call. He might even. It's not even impossible to shove, right?
We have not seen a 4-bet this match so far either.
Mm-hmm. It's not impossible that Danmer shoves, but it is impossible to fold to Doug's 4-bet. You can definitely anticipate a call to 4-bet incoming.
Thank you, Gary.
Raise it up. Make it 5,300.
Doug, 4-bet's $5,300 here. Danmer looks at his hand. Queen jack of clubs. Does he always call here, Ryan, you think?
Yeah, I think he just always calls.
Okay.
Shoves sometimes maybe, but probably just always calls, honestly.
Okay, this pot is dedicated to Sammy Seal.
Oh.
Danmer dedicates a hand, dedicates
It's
a pot.
Sammy Seal.
Sammy Seal is, so
Someone-
it's really hard for me to understand the joke.
No, it's not.
Don't know who Sammy Seal is.
Our hand begins at $100, $200 blinds with about $21,000, $22,000 stacks. This is just a tad over 100 big blinds, which is certainly the standard if you come from an online background. Now, if you're familiar with heads up no limit, this is going to be a pretty standard hand pre-flop. I open the button to $500 with pocket kings, and Danmer looks down at the queen jack suited. Now, when you have queen jack suited in the big blind at the stack depth, you basically always want to be 3-betting. The reason is that this hand plays extremely well post-flop, and even though you might be behind in raw equity against a random ace or random king, you just get such great playability. You can flop good straight draws, you can flop flush draws, you can flop solid pairs, and if you entirely brick the board, you can use it as a bluff hand in many different spots. So I definitely like this play, and it's certainly standard from Danmer. Now back over to me with pocket kings. In general, you want to go ahead and 4-bet here. Once in a while, setting the trap can be all right, but if you're going to do that, I prefer to use my favorite hand, pocket aces. The problem with kings versus aces when it comes to trapping is that more hands have decent equity against kings than with aces. When you have aces, you can continue on basically any flop. Not always true for kings. You might be able to continue any flop, I guess, but not on turns and rivers that include an ace. So don't like flatting this hand as much as maybe aces, and I do decide to 4-bet to $5,300. Pre-flop with queen jack suited, your hands are pretty much tied. Even though you're not extremely excited about the situation, you're getting pretty good odds here with a hand that has a lot of equity against a 4-bet range. If I have a hand like 10s, we're flipping. If I have a hand like ace-3 offsuit, I'm winning, but my hand plays less well post-flop. So certainly a spot you can look to flat with queen jack suited. Yes, sometimes you're going to be up against the worst case scenario, queens, kings, aces, but that's less likely than being up against ace, king, a bluff, or a lower pair. Anyway, he does decide to make the call, so we're going to take a flop here on some pretty deep stacks. Let's see what it is.
Danmer.
Shout out to him. Good luck.
Check.
Danmer.
Oh boy.
Oh boy.
Top pair
That's
for
it.
Danmer.
That is it.
Doug with the overpair.
Rip Danmer.
All the money, I believe,
Rip.
will be getting in here.
Rip Danmer.
Douglas running better here in
Doug
this match.
probably going to bet 3K.
3K, a little.
3,500.
Okay. 15,800 behind for Daniel.
Bet 2,800.
2,800. You're
Really
close,
putting
Ryan.
screws to him.
No chance you can fold here. You flop the top pair. 4-bet pot.
Yep, Danmer's not going anywhere.
Sammy Seal.
It's a question, does he call, does he raise? I think a bet of both is okay. This one I like calling.
Looks like he's counting on a call.
Call.
TV does.
The flop comes jack 7 deuce. Now let's take a look at some things I can buy for $21,000. Oh wow, I can get a 2018 Honda Civic. It's pretty nice. Looks good. Or I could buy a speedboat. I know. 3 Bitcoin. It's pretty boring actually. 691 bottles of Crown whiskey that I couldn't drink until February 15th. Challenge is still on, by the way. Stayed 10. Or a lifetime supply of hair dye for Justin Bonomo. No, wait, shit, it's only 23,000. Wait. A jack or a queen could still come. We're not out of the woods yet. Now I have pocket kings and Danmer checks it over to me. Now in this spot, I've seen a lot of different strategies, but one thing is for sure true. In 4-bet pots, you want to be c-betting a lot in these spots. The reason is because you're going to always have jacks through aces and your opponent's rarely going to have those hands. They might occasionally have aces if they trap pre, but kings, queens, and jacks are generally going to jam pre-flop, so usually you're up against a much weaker range. Now in this spot, you want to go with a very small bet size. The reason is so that you can get a great price on all of your bluffs, and when you do have good hands like queens through aces, or really, jacks through aces, you can work in some bets for value when they're not too likely to have anything. This is a super dry flop. And if they have a hand like 10-9 suited or 10-8 suited or 9-8 suited, you want to make it a bit of a difficult spot for them out of position. If they have air, you want to force a fold, but you also want them maybe to get a little fancy sometimes when you've got value bets. This small bet size really picks apart the way that their range is orchestrated pre-flop when it comes to the post-flop bet size. Now, one problem here with this bet, if you think about it, is if you always bet ace-king, you're in a little bit of a difficult situation. Your opponent can start check raising all in with a lot of hands, and there's not too much you could do if you were betting a lot of bluffs, as well as hands like 10s and ace-king. So what I would recommend is if you do have a hand like ace-king or ace-queen suited and decide to 4-bet, work in some bets, but also split into some checks. You can balance out this strategy by checking back a hand like jack-jack, or maybe occasionally a hand like ace-ace, and it'll overall make your strategy a lot more balanced. But in general, you want to bet this flop 70, 80, 85% of the time with a mixture of good hands and bluffs, and there's not too much your opponent can do about this size. Now, back over to Danmer with his top pair. He's going to realistically have to call. Now, it's worth saying here that on a board with some flush draws, I might like to occasionally check raise all in with top pair. Let's just say this board had 2 hearts and I had a flush draw. If I just called and my opponent jammed the turn, I'd be forced off my equity. Where if I check raised all in on the flop, I for sure get to try and hit my flush, while I also might force my opponent to fold with a hand like ace-king or ace-x or some sort of bluff. So on a board with a lot more draws, I might want to sometimes take a top pair and check raise it all in. I'd still mainly call because I like that line better, but then by having some top pairs, if I want to go on with a flush draw, I can balance it with some top pairs. Anyway, this board is a lot more dry, so I don't mind just having a call range. You could maybe want to throw in a few check raises, especially with some of those gutters as a bluff, as well as maybe a hand like aces if you trapped pre-flop. But again, I think overall I like just playing my range out of a call when I'm in the big blind. Anyway, DANMERRRRRR does decide to call, and let's take a turn.
16,200 in the pot here.
Brick turn for the most part. DANMERRRRR can have a 7 sometimes, but it's generally pretty tough. For the most part, this is kind of like a nothing turn card. You might even see Doug check back the turn here, honestly. Would not surprise me in the slightest. Probably bet queens.
Does go ahead and
Definitely
check.
aces.
The turn is a 7. So yeah, now at this point, we're looking extremely good with our pocket kings, but a new question emerges. Should we be trying the trap sometimes here with hands like overpairs, or should we mainly look to be betting? Now, I don't really hate either way. By betting small, you take away the ability for hands like gut shots to bluff, but you also sort of make it so that he has to have a jack or a 7 to continue. If we check back, he might be able to bluff with a busted gut shot, or if he decided to float the flop with something like ace queen because the price was so good, he might have a chance to bluff the river. Now, I don't think that's too likely. I think that if he did have a hand like ace queen, he would try and take a showdown. But again, we give more chance to win money from those hands by checking than we do from betting. So I would say overall, I like to occasionally jam here with some overpairs and then also check some back. And again, kind of like how I lean towards checking aces a bit more pre-flop or flatting aces pre-flop, I lean a bit more towards betting hands like queens, kings I can go either way, and aces I like a check. Now you're probably asking yourself, Doug, why does it matter for us to split all our overpairs into all these different lines? I'm glad you asked that. Because that way, if our opponent tries to punk us, we can shut him down by having good hands all over the place. If we always put our good hands into one exact line, then it makes us predictable and our opponent can bluff us in other situations. So you have to always be trying to put good hands into all these different lines to protect yourself, and that way you give yourself more opportunity to play a balanced and good strategy against an opponent that might be looking for some holes in your strategy. Anyway, we do check back on the turn, and let's take a river.
Checks the kings, just trying to fade a jack or an ace. Indeed he does. All the money going in here.
Here we go. Will DANMERRRRR
He
be the
might
one to
shove.
bet, or Doug the one to bet?
Good chance DANMERRRRR shoves here, actually. Straight draws missed.
And Doug snaps him off if he bets.
Oh, yeah. Super snaps. Super snaps. Doug's gonna have a lot of ace high in his range here. So.
See if we get an African
It'll
chip
be,
shuffle.
like, kind of interesting if DANMERRRRR checks on top, but he's just gonna call.
The river comes an offsuit 4, and now DANMERRRRR has a decision to make with his jack. Should he jam or should he check? And I've got to say, I'm a much bigger fan of checking. If you have ace jack, I like jamming a bit more, or king jack, I like jamming a bit more. On the offhand that I do end up having a hand like jack 10 off or queen jack off, but that doesn't really matter too much. I'm also a little more likely to be trapping when you have queen jack because you don't block aces or kings, which are hands I'm more likely to look to check on the turn. So from that perspective, I like checking queen jack a bit more. Additionally, if you're going to jam all your jacks here when I check back on the turn, then what do you have when you check on the river? Ace high, maybe a hand like nines? You can't really have very many good hands. Let's just say I had a hand that was a bluff, like a hand like 9-5 of hearts. Well, if you check on the river, I might be compelled to bluff there because I don't have any showdown value and I can get you off some weak hands. I'm having a flashback right now. Fold! Fold! Bluffing sauce is so bad! Oh, GG in the 25K, guys. But we did get Platinum Star. Now, the reason I brought up that 9-5 suited hand is even though that the board is quite different and we're against a very different opponent, the concept is the same. When you take these lines, you do it with good hands and bluffs. And you might not get to take that line again for months or years or however long it might take to be in that same spot again. But the core element is that you're balanced with your approach. Sometimes you bluff and get stacked. Sometimes you value bet and you stack them. Sometimes you bluff and get it through. You don't really know what's going to happen in each individual situation. But if I 4-bet bet the flop, and check a board pairing turn, I can absolutely have both good hands and bad hands on the river to bet if you check to me. That's why I think I really like checking the river in DANMERRRRRR shoes. While maybe I get to hero call with a hand like ace-king, I would probably never hero call with a hand like tens because I block so many bluffs, but I might hero call with a hand like ace-king. At the same time, I might bluff with a bunch of other hands that you just can't get any value from by betting. Additionally, you strengthen that check range so I can't push you around when you do check the river, because if you're not going to call with a jack because you're betting all of them, then your check range on the river is just going to end up being very weak.
Remember the last time, a couple times he's done this, he's done the African chip shuffle.
Oh, what is it like? Just count your chips forever?
Yeah. The Africans, when you count them a lot, the English chip shuffle is the...
Why do they count? Why do they count? Do they count a lot in Africa?
All in.
All in.
Call. Doug
That's it.
takes down the $42,000 pot. Pocket kings versus queen jack.
GG.
Doug crushing this heads-up match, showing he is still one of the best heads-up Nolan Home players in the entire world. Doug Polk, ladies and gentlemen, wins another hand. DANMERRRRRR pulls out the backpack. Will he reload?
Sammy Seal like the queen jack.
Bang, bang.
Thank you for joining me for today's episode of Poker Hands. And if you like learning poker from me, make sure to check out my training site, upswingpoker.com.